The information featured in this program is general in nature and therefore should not be relied upon. Guests appearing on the program may have commercial arrangements with some of the companies mentioned. Before making any investment, insurance or financial planning decisions, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether or not your decision is appropriate for you. Property Investing Matters is brought to you by Destiny, empowering investors to achieve success through property investment for more than 24 years.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Property Investing Matters. Great to have you on board for another week of property education. Now, thanks to everyone who have sent in their questions for the show tonight. If we don't get to your question tonight, then we will carry it over for a future show, probably the one after next week, and you will still get the book price that week. But if we do answer your question tonight, you're going to be receiving the book of mine, which is called How to Achieve Property Success. This is valued at $40 in all good bookshops. So it is a genuine prize, and it is the price for all of the questions that we answer tonight. Now to my guest, strata consultant Michael Teys. Michael has been a strata lawyer specialising in strata issues, and today he's a strata academic researcher and also an educator working for UNSW in Sydney and Deakin University in Melbourne. Tonight we are looking at the state of the unit market and a few COVID-related issues. So let's get started and welcome Michael to the show. Michael, how are you going?
Good, Margaret. I'm sorry about my long COVID hair, but apart from that, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Well, we were just talking about that off air, and I think we all have COVID hair. I'm sure all of the viewers have COVID hair as well. And I just can't wait to get out there to the hairdresser again, which I'm sure everybody would love to. But for today, what I really want to talk about is the unit market, because we don't generally specify the unit market in most of the shows. We do talk about the property market and what it's doing. And when we're looking at figures all around Australia for the property market, you tend to find that it's throwing all property in together, and it doesn't differentiate between units and houses. And often that can skew the figures a fair amount. So what I really want to know at the moment, we know that we've come through quite a few years of oversupply of units in a number of our markets. Are there still markets with an oversupply at the moment? And if there are, which ones are they?
Yeah. Thanks, Margaret. Yes, there certainly are oversupplied areas. But before I get to that, I want to say something about the press treatment of this topic as well. Because, we know in the times in which we live particularly, the press love to give a story a negative headline, even if the underlying story is a positive one. And we saw that recently with the ABC report on the core logic numbers to the end of March. The headline is unit prices fall in many city suburbs amid a house-led real estate boom. And that, of course, is a true statement. But what the headline doesn't say is that units have in fact gone up in value in every capital city in Australia, from Sydney at a meagre 0.2%, but right up to 9.8% in Darwin, 11.2% in Hobart, healthy figures in Perth of 4, Adelaide 5, Brisbane up 1.9, Canberra up 5.8%. So the truth of the matter is that unit prices have gone up across the board. What hasn't happened, of course, is that they haven't gone up as much as houses. But I think it's time that we started to look at the market separately, because not everyone wants to buy a house. And not everyone can afford to buy a house, either to live in or as an investment property. They're very different things. So we need to start looking at them differently. If you then drill down into the figures, some interesting things come out. In Sydney, for example, the underperforming units, where there have been significant falls, are in the middle ring suburbs of St Leonard's, Chatswood, Croydon, Lane Cove. Now, in those places, we've seen a lot of development over the last few years, and it's pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? It's pretty unoriginal. They're all much of a muchness. There's no real point of difference to the units, they're a little bit ordinary, and there's a lot of them. So those areas have taken a hit. In Melbourne, the worst performing places are Moonee Ponds, Ascot Vale and Kew. Now again, that's interesting because it's not Docklands or St Kilda or Port Melbourne that we'd expect.
South Bank, which I would have expected, just
Yeah,
having seen, you know, the cranes in the sky over the last couple of years in those really inner city suburbs there.
Now
I would have expected them to be worse.
that might be because they've already taken their hit and are not selling, so the sales aren't being reported in any great number. But nevertheless, interesting again that's gone to the middle ring where again developments haven't got a standout point of view. I just want to take a quick look at a couple of other cities. In Brisbane, however, we go back to the trend of the inner city apartments being the poor performers. South Brisbane down 9% and Brisbane City down 7.8%. So that's sort of where Melbourne and Sydney were 2 or 3 years ago, 2 years ago anyway. And they're very poor numbers. Canberra is holding its own, and Adelaide in the city is down 4.8, but the suburbs are doing well. So I think we see there some distortion in the way things are being viewed and reported. Anecdotally, units that are older and from smaller blocks are doing very well. They're selling very quickly in Brisbane, for example. We're looking in around Nunda and Chermside and those suburbs, and good older units. When I say older, I mean 70s, 80s, 90s, are selling within days in the Brisbane market.
So, Michael, we've been talking for years about the oncoming, first of all, oversupply in cities like Sydney, to a lesser degree, Melbourne to a great degree, Brisbane along the river there, and even Adelaide, where urban living isn't really a thing and units were being built. And then we talked about it when it arrived, that we had a bigger oversupply. What's the situation now in those major areas? Has the oversupply worked its way out yet? Is it working its way out yet? Or are we still in oversupply?
I think we're still in oversupply in those big cities, in Sydney and Melbourne, in parts of those cities. And I think probably, as I said, they've either taken their hit on these numbers or they're just not moving. So the evidence is not being tracked in any proper way. If you look at the vacancy rate, it's around 3 at the moment. So that's just just in the middle of the pendulum. So it would certainly be correcting itself. The question is, has it corrected itself yet? Unit markets, of course, react more slowly than the housing market because it takes 3 years to build a decent unit block. So, or it can take up to 3 years. So I think it is correcting itself. It probably hasn't finished the correction yet, but it's certainly on the way. The point for investors, I think, Margaret, and it's the same as in the housing market, is to be looking for that investment that has a point of difference. That really, is it a balcony? Is it a location? Is it a style? The Art Deco blocks, for example, in Sydney. What is it about the particular unit that is making it different to the standard cookie cutter, high rise, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom? For example, with working from home becoming a thing, units that have a workstation, a workplace, are going to be sought after. So it's looking for that distinguishing feature, and not just accepting the press and the sweeping generalizations that of necessity the press make in order to speak about the various trends. But we need to dig a little bit deeper. And when you do dig deeper, the unit market is not all bad news.
So are there any parts of Australia where there is a demand for units that isn't being met right now?
I think you'll find that in Darwin and in Hobart, but they're small towns, small cities, of course. But yes, I think that's the case there.
I hope so. I've got a unit in Darwin that I'd like to grow in value. It's not back to where it was when I bought it. It's still double what I paid for it, but it's not anywhere near what it was.
No, there really is. We own a unit in Sydney, in a city, and it's a good unit in an older block, It's a 20-year-old block with a city skyline view and a good balcony, and it's doing very well, exceedingly well.
Yeah.
You know, there is more to it than doom and gloom. There is certainly doom and gloom in some of the cookie cutter buildings, and it's not just oversupply. There's also quality issues, which we'll talk about, no doubt, as the show goes on.
Well, as it turns out, we're about to talk about that right now. And, you know, to switch up the topics a little bit, I believe that there are new design and construction laws in New South Wales. Can you tell us a little bit more about exactly what they are and how are they going to impact on the unit market?
Yeah, there are sweeping changes in the way in which buildings are built now in New South Wales from the 1st of July. So it's very, very new. But we have a building commissioner who's been given very wide powers to go onto building sites and stop work, to refuse occupation certificates to be issued until he and his team are satisfied that they've been built correctly. Now, this is a very new power, but the commissioner is quite a good operator, if I can use that expression, and he's taken to some of the biggest and notorious developers first and issued stop orders on some very big buildings. So far, there have been 12 developments that have been stopped in their tracks, nearing completion, until such time as they can be satisfied that provisions have been made for better workmanship in the building. Now, that's not a lot when you consider that something like 1,700 buildings are registered a year in Sydney. But nevertheless, it has made a statement and it has sent shockwaves through the development community that those that are persistent breaches of standards and quality will be held to account, and they will be held to account at a time when it hurts them most, when their peak debt is drawn down and they haven't yet got the cash in from the buyers. So it is a very significant, and it's almost a micromanagement of some developments. The other aspect of the new laws, which is very interesting, is that from now on, you have to register your detailed building plans as the building is built. And if there's a variation, then the variation needs to be registered with the Commissioner's office within 2 days of that change being made. Now, that's going to do two things. Firstly, it's going to allow the Commissioner's team to make desktop assessments of what's going on in the field and respond very quickly. And secondly, where buildings have been constructed and then there are problems, it's going to give some real detailed papers that are useful in seeking rectification orders. So that's again a very drastic step that's been taken, but in circumstances where it was well overdue and well required. So there's really a lot. I'm very hopeful that this is going to make a significant change to the quality of what is coming down the line. It's not doing anything, of course, for those that have built over the last 20 years when supervisionary standards have been lax, but it is certainly, I think, likely to restore confidence to the market and improve the quality of the sector as we move on. Will that be copied by other states and territories? Well, you'd have to be a very brave person at the moment to suggest that there'd be any harmony at all between our states and territories. But it's certainly a very, very interesting approach. It's quite novel, it's quite unique, and I think it's going to achieve great results for New South Wales.
Certainly, if similar changes aren't adopted into the other states, they're going to have some kind of change of their own, because I understand that it isn't just New South Wales that has all of these issues with buildings. There certainly are plenty of them in Melbourne, and no doubt plenty of them in Brisbane as well.
Yes,
and the other states too.
Well, the worst, Margaret, is Canberra.
Right.
The unit market in Canberra has been subjected to some horrible work, and there are some very, very serious problems there, and a very poor response, if I might say, by the regulators in Canberra.